Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Black MS Experience Summit. I am delighted to discuss employment with you today. And where I would like to start is with being proactive. Both pre diagnostic and diagnostic journeys sometimes include a lot of new events. So we want to prepare ourselves by being proactive in our work with the doctor we have chosen, with the different sorts of medications we choose. We want to know as much as possible ahead of time before we dive into this big pool. We know that research shows that MS may affect us differently than it does white people. Black people living with MS may face a more aggressive progression and also greater disability. And sometimes this is related to pre diagnostic difficulties, finding a doctor that really understands the disease, et cetera. Specifically, we may experience balance coordination and walking problems, more cognitive and visual symptoms. We may also have frequent relapses with poor recovery. So, we definitely want to look at some of the ways, medically and otherwise, that we can be proactive. Specifically, when you're thinking about choosing a disease modification therapy, there's a lot more available now than there used to be. So, looking at the symptoms, at how it's taken, at how your insurance will accept it, will be important in keeping you on a career track that is what you want to be on. Also, finding a doctor that you like, that you trust, that you feel confident in is going to be important. At this point in time, it's not like getting a flu shot once a year. You're going to be working with this individual long term. So, you absolutely want to make sure that the discussions you have with them are fluid and understandable and respectful. And then finally, as you're looking at perhaps different sorts of um, technical assistives, things that can help you move around your house, get around your office, help you to get to work. Those things can be looked at so that you can continue to work and uh, be successful in your career. Now let's look at the issue of disclosure. Disclosure, first of all, is not necessary at any time. You do not have to disclose your disease to your employer. There's nothing legally that you need to disclose unless you're in a position that has safety issues related to the disease. Then you may need to disclose according to your employer's policy. But generally, disclosure is completely up to you. It's your decision. However, if you decide to disclose, there's some things you might want to look at. First of all, who would you tell? There are a couple ways you could go. One is you could talk to your direct supervisor. The other is human resources, and we would definitely recommend that you consider human resources first, primarily because they understand the law. They know exactly what they would need to know and what sorts of recommendations from your physician or your OT or your PT, that's occupational therapy or physical therapist, they would need in order to work with some of the issues you might have. And you want to make sure that you're disclosing for a particular reason. Are you disclosing because you need reasonable accommodations? Are you disclosing because you're concerned about your work schedule? So you do want to have a specific reason for disclosing. And secondly, disclosing to human resources may be a more direct route to what you're wanting to do in order to advance your career and make you better able to do the work. When you're disclosing, consider this a cooperative relationship. You're working with your employer to find ways to do the job as well and even better than you have been able to. Now, when you think about disclosing to other employees, friends on the job, that's fine, but keep in mind that they don't have the legal responsibility to keep your secret for you. So if you need to talk with someone about it, there are support groups in the community, both sponsored by the National Multiple Sclerosis Society and independent. And there's also one on one friend lines through the Multiple Sclerosis Society that might be helpful to you if you need someone to talk to. Now, there's a consideration of partial disclosure versus full disclosure. And let's talk about what the benefits, pros and cons of those might be. With partial disclosure, telling someone I have a medical condition keeps your privacy. It also allows you to ask for certain things without necessarily having to tell people more about the disease. But full disclosure is often more beneficial because it allows you to access the laws and policies around reasonable accommodations. There may be examples of I have a medical condition. If, for instance, you come in late one day and you're not feeling well, or something to that effect. But if you're looking to change your schedule or add some things to your job position based on the disease, it would be very important to disclose fully. And when you're ready to disclose, prepare by having some documentation from your doctor or from your occupational therapist or from your physical therapist so that you can move along smoothly. These are things that are going to be asked for if you're asking for reasonable accommodations. So, to be prepared for that and other instances where you might need this paperwork, it would be good to get it ahead of time. Also, it might be good to speak with your physician before disclosing and before you need the paperwork so that you can know where they stand and what sorts of things they can suggest that might negate having to fully disclose. Let's talk a little bit about the law behind reasonable accommodations and other sorts of opportunities for people that have disability. Let's look a little bit at the Americans with Disabilities Act. This was an act that was put in place to help individuals with disabilities access the things that every American citizen should be able to access. That includes workplaces, but it also includes schools, transportation, and other public areas. Are you aware that many years ago, 20 years ago, you couldn't have gotten into many of our federal buildings that have those beautiful big staircases, but no access for people with wheelchairs or people that might have problems walking? Now those buildings have access because of this act. So when you're thinking about reasonable accommodations, this is the basis for reasonable accommodations. Another thing that we have as an advantage is that now equal opportunity has to be provided in recruiting, hiring, and promoting individuals as long as they can do the work regardless of any disability that they might have. So now let's take a peek at requesting reasonable accommodations. When you think about reasonable accommodations, the first thing you want to consider is how is this going to help me and my employer work together to make sure that my job is at the quality level the business expects? Now, please keep in mind, this is not at all just about the employer. This is about your career and being able to maintain the work that you are doing. But if the employer feels a part of that effort, they are certainly going to make an effort to work with you. You want to make sure that you're partners in this effort. And reasonable accommodations can include changes to the work site. They can include getting equipment, reasonably priced equipment like grab bars or computer programs that can help you with voice actualization or even restructuring your schedule. But consider when you're thinking about these things, reviewing what your doctor has said in terms of available therapies and medications, but also what you might need on the job and what the employer can reasonably provide. I remember a case where a person wanted an elevator put in because they couldn't get up to the second floor to their job. The elevator was $30,000. That's an example of an unreasonable accommodation. There are certain accommodations that the employer is going to be happy to make in order to keep a good employee. So, depending on the way we phrase it, depending on what we're asking for, it certainly is possible to work with the employer. There is one more thing we want to consider, and that is, are we able, even with accommodations, to continue doing the job? That's going to mean looking at what you're dealing with and what's available in terms of therapies and help through your physician, and also looking at your job description. There may be, however, as an accommodation another job on that particular employee's group of jobs that you can take advantage of. So it doesn't necessarily mean leaving the business simply because you may be able to do another job rather than the one you're currently in. Now let's take a look at the Family and Medical Leave Act. This is a federal law enacted to help people that need time off to achieve that. The law is available to eligible employees, and that would mean that you've been on the job at least 12 months and you've worked at least 25 hours per week. Those eligible employees can have up to 12 work weeks of leave within a 12-month period, and you can split that up in 1 week or 2 weeks here or 4 weeks there as needed. Please keep in mind that this is unpaid. Although the employer may have other benefits that you're entitled to that can make up for that pay, like short term disability or long term disability. But this act is designed to give you the time needed to deal with a serious medical condition. And once again, there's going to be documentation needed from your doc and also to have talked to HR about your needs. Another really great thing about this act is that it can be utilized for people caring for individuals with MS or other disease issues or new parents. There's a number of things that this act covers. So, this definitely is something you might want to look into. Now, let's talk about financial impact of working or not working with MS. People with MS know all too well that there are emotional and physical changes because of the disease, but there can also be financial issues. A society study it estimates that an average cost of living with MS can be up to $88,487 per year. So you can see on the screen too that these estimates are only rising year by year. That means that if at all possible, we want to maintain employment for a number of reasons. For the benefits, private insurance often pays for more and is more reliable than public insurance. Also, we have other unseen benefits, or rather benefits we don't think about, like being able to save for retirement. There may be certain childcare benefits. There is definitely an emotional benefit to being able to work in the public and feel valuable depending on how you look at employment and being able to communicate with other people on a daily basis. So considering whether you want to work or not work depends on more than just an isolated incident like a hospitalization or some sort of relapse. It also depends on the long term. What do I want long term? You may be questioning your worth and identity. You may be grieving the loss of work and financial independence. You may be anxious about your future if you decide not to work. So before making that decision, look at all of the possibilities that are available, including seeking new employment and once again, reasonable accommodations on the job that you currently have. Now, if in fact you find that medically you need the time to recuperate, there are many times options for short-term or long-term disability. Now, this is not true on every job. It's not a requirement for the employer to have this, but in some cases the employer may have it. And this is wonderful because it means that if you fit the qualifications of short-term disability, which would mean your doctor's paperwork, then you may be able to take a certain amount of time off to recuperate while still receiving a percentage of your pay. Same thing with long term disability. Say you have a lesion on your neck or you have some other sort of thing where it's going to take a little longer for you to recuperate, then long term disability can be very helpful. Once again, it is not your entire salary, but it's usually a percentage of your salary. Also, with long term disability, please keep in mind that your employer may require you to file for Social Security disability insurance through the federal government to cover a portion of that. But that's something that you can think about and talk about with your employer if this occurs. Now, if you do not have long term or short term disability on your job, there's also Social Security disability insurance through the federal government. There are some preliminary requirements. You have to have worked a certain number of quarters and you have to have worked recently. However, with Social Security disability, that is a fail-safe that you can certainly apply for if you do not have short or long-term disability. There's also another thing to look at, which with Social Security disability insurance, there's a much lower percentage of your salary that they will cover. So that's something to keep in mind. They cover a certain amount for you. And if you have children under 18, they will also cover half of the amount you're qualified for with your children. So there is a benefit to at least having that available. Also, please keep in mind that there is an application process that can take up to 4 months. Sometimes it can take a year, depending on whether you have to appeal. And you cannot apply for this benefit before you've been unable to work, completely unable to work for at least 6 months. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at Social Security disability insurance. So, having discussed the different sorts of disability that are available to you, we talked about long term, we talked about short term on your job, and we talked about the federally funded Social Security disability insurance. Now, we want to talk about finding flexibility in your career path. Why is that important? Because of those options, working or not working, the career path and continuing to work is probably the best way to provide you and your family with a stable financial picture going forward. So when you're looking at flexibility, consider that working full time has a lot of caveats that it didn't used to have. You can work at home for some employers, which means that you don't have to stress yourself with commuting or sitting in a straight back chair all day or times when you need to rest. You can work those into your work day. So these are things that you want to look at. Working with a flexible schedule. You can work a night schedule. You can work a day schedule. Working part time. That's an option too. Some jobs pay well or pay within the financial boundaries to keep you financially stable without your having to be there for 8 to 10 hours a day. So consider the different sorts of things that you might be able to do that will satisfy your career goals and help you feel that you are progressing without stressing you in a way that is going to perhaps lead to disability or difficulty continuing on the job. And then there's also when you're looking for work, it's not always easy to do, but it would be beneficial to look into the benefits that the job offers. And of course, when you go to an interview, you can't say, well, what benefits do you offer? But there are websites like Glassdoor and Indeed that often have information on mid-sized to large organizations that can give you a sense of whether they have short-term and long-term disability, how they respond to people that are asking for reasonable accommodations. That is certainly going to help when you're applying for work. As for resources, we just have a plethora of resources available to us. Thank God for the internet and for all of these different options that we can just have at our fingertips. This would include disability rights attorneys. We actually provide lists of disability rights attorneys in your area. So if you're interested in that, you have any questions, we can provide a list through the Navigators program. And let's talk just briefly about the Navigators program. The MS Navigator program is a group of people that work with constituents to help them get the resources and opportunities that they need. So we can certainly work with you on finding lists of physicians in your area, uh, OTs and PTs in your area, types of durable medical equipment like wheelchairs and things like that, where you can get those and where there might be financial options for those. So contact us. We'd be happy to help you. Also, there's job accommodation network that can help you to find work based on your difficulties and show you what types of work might be available. You can look at Social Security's ticket to work if you're already on disability. If you're already on Social Security disability insurance, the first year, ticket to work is available to help you get back into full time employment. And finally, uh, you can look at the U.S. Vocational Rehabilitation Program. Look on the internet for this program. You can sign up for it as long as you have the paperwork to show you're disabled. They'd be happy to help you find something that meets your criteria, meets the needs that you have. And then also, if you look at your state, each state has an unemployment office, and that unemployment office often can provide you with an individual counselor that will look at your needs, look at what's available in the market, and search for you. So there's so many options out there, and we are just in a really good atmosphere for not only medications that can help you stay at work, but resources that can help you find work and modify your work. We are just in a very good position. Thank you so much for coming to the summit, and we are delighted to have you here.